Is it working? Yes, okay. So welcome everyone to the Danish Institute for Advanced Study. As you know, the world is changing all the time, and we are facing many challenges, and we are going to talk about one of them today. And it seems that there's an increasing demand for understanding all the topics sort of across disciplines. And this is what we are doing here in DS. We are focusing on the interdisciplinarity. So DS was established in 2009, and from 2016 we started hiring young fellows to DS. And in that way, DS is a strategic initiative at SDU because we really believe that interdisciplinary research is important for solving these future challenges. DS has members from all 5 faculties at the university, and we are thus a truly interdisciplinary setting. At the moment, we have about 40 chairs and senior fellows, and we also have some external chairs associated with DS. And then we have 23 fellows in DS, where already 7 of them have become associate professors here at SDU. So the main task, you could say, here at DS, that is really to recruit these young talents to do interdisciplinary research. And then the second main task is to mentor these young fellows and develop them into very strong and high-profile researchers at SDU. And then the third part is, of course, to do this interdisciplinary research. And that we do by, for instance, inviting speakers like Agnes Callamard that we are going to listen today. So we invite very high profile and speakers with interdisciplinary settings to stimulate the discussions in DS. And in that way, we try to create this encouraging research environment. We also have some small funds where we can stimulate research projects, and some of them are also dealing with the topic that we are going to discuss today. So I would also like to invite you not only today to come and collaborate and visit DS. We are very open for everyone being interested in interdisciplinary research. And then I hope that this talk today will inspire you to discuss with your colleagues and develop your thoughts and your ideas in the direction of the topic of today. So welcome to DS, and with these words I would like to give the word to James Rogers, who has invited Agnes to visit us today.
Thank you so much, Mariana. I'm all mic'd up, we're all set. Okay, wonderful. Hello and welcome. It's so good to see so many of you here today. It is my distinct pleasure and honour to welcome Dr. Agnes Callamard to DS and to SDU. Agnes is the Secretary General of Amnesty International, the world's largest human rights NGO. And I couldn't think of anybody better to lead Amnesty at this turbulent moment that the world is currently going through. I was lucky enough to work with Agnes for a number of years during her role as UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary and arbitrary executions, where she led investigations into the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, and the shooting down of Ukraine Airlines flight PS752, amongst many other investigations. Indeed, where there are human rights violations around the world, you will see Agnes trying to protect people around the world. And this pays testament to the fact that she has just returned from Ukraine. Indeed, that is what Agnes will be talking about today. So I'll hand over to you. Thank you, Agnes.
Thank you very much for this lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and to meet you all. and to discover this very interesting institute. Caroline and I are thinking we need to come back and work here for a while to think about all the connection that you are able to make at an academic level, and think about the practical implications in terms of human rights. But for today, I would like to share with you some reflection following my trip to Ukraine, a one-week visit with several colleagues, and I'll return to that a bit later. Before jumping into Ukraine, I just wanted to remind us of the environment within which Ukraine has taken place. And I don't think I'm going to point to anything new to you, but I think it's important to set the context of Ukraine. It's a context of major overlapping threats and challenges, many of which are existentialist: the climate crisis, pandemics, deep inequalities between and within state, a global economy delivering unimaginable wealth to a few, and very low wages, unemployment, poverty, and now food starvation to millions. The latest of the Industrial Revolution, information technology, is transforming daily life and societies probably to an extent far greater than previous technological revolution. Indeed, it may even transform what it means to be human. It is a revolution we can't yet fully understand, let alone control. What about the demographic transformation, with more people living in urban settings and more people on the move, often perilously, both within and across borders? The demographic divide between a very aging, rich Western world, while a staggering 90% of global youth reside outside the Western world, under the impoverished legacies often of colonialism. And then there is the superpowers vying for new hegemony: China and the US and Russia, destroying, destabilizing, and a number of states at regional level impatiently waiting in the wings of global influence. At a normative level, international rules are defied, attacks are mounted against the very idea of universal norms and human rights specifically, while an unraveling of the post-World War II system is engineered. And these multi-dimensional global shifts are generating human rights violation at a scale and spread likely without precedent since the end of World War II, enabled also by well-organized, well-resourced global and local campaigns and disinformation. The COVID pandemic has magnified a lot of those problems with brutal clarity. It has magnified how deep-seated inequalities are embodied in our international system, and it has revealed its brokenness as well. It has also demonstrated, in my opinion, that racism is hardwired into that international system, evident in whom it does and does not rescue, in whom it declares a victim and who it ignores, in which deaths are mourned and which are ignored, in whose life matters and whose just don't. So I have described the world we live in as instability force 10 on our human history scale. Our world is one of crumbling international infrastructure, brutal nationalism, inequalities in death and life, and human rights betrayed on many fronts. And as we are meeting today, Russia is assaulting Ukraine, committing the crime of aggression. Thousands are probably dying, have died, and millions more have been forced to flight. The estimation is around 4 million. Russia aggression, though, is neither an incident nor an anecdote. It is a reflection. It sends us back a mirror image of our failures and of our complicity over time. Maybe a deformed mirror image enlarging what's wrong rather than shrinking it, but it is a mirror image nevertheless. So let me highlight why I'm saying that. So first aspect I want to highlight is the demise of the international system and rules. So much has been said already about the fact that Russia has misbehaved with complete impunity for years. Georgia, Syria, and before that Chechnya, just to name a few, the frozen conflict even older. Disproportionate attacks targeting of civilian and a civilian object, destruction of school, hospital, use of mercenaries. So Russia's invasion of Ukraine on 24th February 2022 was indeed the second time that Russia moved to openly occupy sovereign Ukraine. In 2014, it already did so, including through the illegal annexation of Crimea. So all of that is correct, but all of that is putting the focus on Russia and on the lack of response to Russia. But I think the demise of our system is much deeper than that. For years, at least since 9/11, in the wake of the horrible attack against the Twin Towers in New York, the international multilateral system and its members have governed over its demise. In the name of the war on terror, states have indulged in the use of force wherever in the world their hunt of non-state groups with whom they deem themselves to be at war has led. These have included the United States 2001 war on Afghanistan, and it has also included war against state, such as the war on Iraq, beginning in 2003, all of which has been interpreted as amounting to aggression, which could not be justified on the ground of self-defense. In other words, Russia's aggression of Ukraine has many precedents and not just Russian precedent. I'm not mentioning here the multitude attacks targeting specific individuals around the world in the name of the war on terror, often enough using drones, which are ever more agile, ever more deadly, and ever more humanless, even more regulation-free. The second drone age is upon us, has been upon us for several years, and the international community, beginning with its most powerful members, are governing through non-regulation, administrating the lack of regulation. Now, you may say these are contradictions in terms, but I don't think so. I'm not making a grammatical mistake. I think it takes a lot of effort and political will and stamina to ensure such a lack of regulation. It takes governance. So we are governing over the lack of regulation, and we have done so for many years. The outcome is an increasing blurring of the lines between war and peace, a pattern of conflict across the world amounting to globalized warfare, and a steady erosion of international law and the rules-based international system. And so came Russia's aggression on 24th of February. An aggression which I agree may be possibly unprecedented by its scale, although the example of Iraq, the US in Iraq is quite close, if not very similar to that one. But it is not that different in legal terms. It is not that different in terms of what it highlights about our international system from what has preceded it over the last 20 years. So that's the first point I wanted to highlight. Many, many precedents, not just Russian precedents, that have led to that situation. The second point I would like to bring to your attention is that, of course, there is very little doubt that through that aggression, the Russian government are seeking to usher in a new world order, sweeping away the systems built at the end of World War II and following the fall of the Berlin Wall. They seek to replace that system with a new one. It's not clear quite what it would entail, but it's certainly, at this point in time, clear that it will be governed by military power and not rights. How shall we respond to it? Thus far, I think the international community has been far more divided than we in Europe may wish to believe. On March 2nd, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It passed with 141 member states voting in favor, 5 against, 35 countries abstaining. At this point in time, the UN Secretary General celebrated the vote, declaring the General Assembly had issued its message loud and clear, an international community message. But if you dig a bit deeper behind this vote, then you notice that some voices are more muffled. For instance, Africa. All 54 African states took part in the historic vote. 28 condemned Russia, 17 abstained from the vote, including South Africa, and 1, Eritrea, voted against the UN General Assembly. So 17 out of 54 did not participate to that condemnation. A month later, when the General Assembly adopted a new resolution expelling Russia from the Human Rights Council, the response was even more muffled from a range of countries, and I'm focusing here on Africa. 93 voted in favor and 24 voted against, including 9 African countries. Okay, so 9 African countries voted against. Of the 58 abstention against the resolution, 23 were African, so half of the overall global abstention. And these are prominent countries in Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa defended the country's neutral stand on the ground that in such cases a peaceful resolution should always be sought. Indeed, when I was in South Africa last month and I met with a range of officials and civil society activists, everyone, including civil society, advocated for the rebirth of the non-aligned movement in the wake of the Russia aggression of Ukraine. And it is still very much on the agenda, not just in South Africa or in Africa. It's on the agenda throughout the global South. Some states have justified their abstention by referencing the West hypocrisy. How is it that there is no accountability for the US invasion of Iraq on false pretense, similarly as Russia, by the way? How is it that the Israeli government imposes apartheid on Palestinians and there is very little outrage? How is it that Saudi Arabia can bomb in civilians in Yemen and still be welcomed to G20 meetings in the West Hall of Power? Why is it acceptable that the French government insists that they will only leave Mali in its time and at its hour? So these are questions to all of us. The notion of double standard is absolutely everywhere in the global South right now in its handling or reflection on Ukraine. And I'm not just talking about the usual government suspect. I'm talking about civil society and academics. Russia has won a great deal of goodwill, in fact, in a previous political incarnation for its support of anti-colonial movement and the struggle against apartheid. It is now prepared to provide military support to various governments fighting various insurgencies, including through such group as Wagner. Just looking back at Africa again, the data indicates where they exist that Russia may have agreement with up to 20 African countries for their military defense. All of those data, all of this information should raise many warnings to the West and to all of us who seem to believe that there is such a strong position against Ukraine, globally adopted, globally endorsed, because it is far from being the case. And that is a big warning in terms of what world we want to build on the wake of this Russia aggression. So let me highlight why it is a problem for the future of the global system we want to build. At the moment, the international community, or I think it's more, it will be more appropriate to talk about the Western countries, with maybe a few others, are very much focusing on sanctions, and they are focusing on the delivery of justice. A key dimension are tribunals. A tribunal, several tribunals against Russia aggression. There is a great deal of ongoing bilateral and multilateral exercise at the moment. There was early this week a big conference in I think Lithuania over or Latvia, I forgot. So what is the Western Bloc proposing, or what are several Western countries proposing? They are proposing to establish an hybrid international tribunal, which will be set up through an international treaty involving 3 or so Western countries and Ukraine. It's, it is an option that is supported by Ukraine. That's certainly what they told me when I was there. And it is an option supported by the Western government. Now, what it will mean for the world we want to build is that you will have, you will set an example of justice which will be driven by a few countries, not by the so-called international community. You will have a model of post-conflict, possibly, post-conflict judicial system that will be very far from being international. When I was in Ukraine with my colleagues, we advocated for a different approach. We really recommended to the Ukrainian authorities that they consider setting up an hybrid tribunal, but adopted by the UN General Assembly to get a much broader basis for, for justice, but also for the world we want to build in and to develop in the wake of Russia. They don't reject that proposal, but they are worried. They are worried that they will not get the numbers. So, I think it's a crucial point here that Ukraine right now is not sure. They think they will get it adopted, but they don't think they will get it adopted with sufficient numbers to make it politically, historically meaningful, and that's stopping them. I think if we gave more time, and if the Western countries were more inclined to build a global constituency rather than to drive a victor's justice, we will have the opportunity to do that. So the question we have to ask ourselves is why? Why is it that Western countries right now, including in the first place the US, are not trying to build a bigger coalition around Ukraine and around the response, the long-term response to Ukraine. If you recall, in the first months after the invasion, the US Secretary of State went on a so-called world tour to try to ensure big support. Where did that tour bring him? It brought him to Saudi Arabia. It brought him to Israel. It brought him to the UAE. It brought him indirectly to Venezuela. I think here you have the beginning of an answer as to what prompted that world tour. It was to secure access and oil and gas. All of that is important. I'm not saying that it should not have happened, but why stop there? Why not try to also visit countries that are not going to provide oil and gas to the international community, but that can provide soft power, that can provide that kind of legitimacy that the world needs? That was not done. I was in Africa at the time, that's why I'm using that example. I met with the Zambian president, who is one of those who actually took a very strong stand with Kenya against Russia's aggression. He saw that as something that Africa should rally around. You know, it's a form of colonialism. It goes against everything Africa should believe it. He got nothing in exchange, you know, nothing. Not even, well, I mean, there was a bit of a verbal recognition, but that's about it. So here, I think we have a problem. We have governments in the West that are not putting enough effort in building a global coalition, that are more intent on ensuring access to key resources, but are not looking at coalition building and soft power as part of the resources required to build the next global system. The other problems, of course, that we are also confronting is the fact that the double standard over the Western responses is also a double standard over the way the West stand on international justice. I mean, you all know that the US has not signed and unsigned the International Criminal Court Statute. You may also know that it went a bit further than that, in that it adopted something called the American Service Members Protection Act, which contained a clause called the Hague Invasion Act, which says that if a US or an allied national is detained by the ICC, the US military can use armed force to extricate them. You know, the rest of the world know all about it. I will not talk about the bilateral immunity agreements, which the US has kind of forced a number of other countries to sign on so that they can ensure that their servicemen accused of war crimes are not turned over to the ICC. Not just about the US. Let's look again at the Kampala Agreement, which is the agreement that is the basis for the inclusion of the crime of aggression under the ICC statute. There is a definition of aggression. I will not go there. It does focus on the fact that individuals responsible at a political level can be prosecuted by the court. But individuals responsible for the crime of aggression can only be prosecuted if their states have ratified the Rome Statute. So here we have a problem. Unlike individuals responsible for other crimes under the Rome Statute. So right now, the ICC has jurisdiction over Russians committing war crimes on Ukraine territory because the Ukrainian territory, because the Ukrainian government has signed an agreement with the ICC around that. But the ICC cannot go after Russians that have committed the crime of aggression, because the crime of aggression can only be investigated by the ICC if the country responsible for it has ratified the ICC. So already we have a problem here, and that clause was specifically driven by Western states at the time of the discussion. And then in 2010, when that clause was first discussed, most countries thought that they agreed that state parties were covered by this funny jurisdictional scheme unless they opted out. In other words, initially when that funny things around the jurisdiction of the ICC was agreed, states thought that in order for individuals not to be prosecuted by the ICC, their government had to opt out from the ICC statute regarding aggression. So make an active step to opt out. In 2017, France, the UK, and a few other states reversed that interpretation. And they insisted that state parties were presumed to be out of the jurisdictional scheme unless they opted in by ratifying the amendment, the Kampala amendment regarding aggression. And that too was driven by Western governments who are now facing a situation where, in fact, their own legal intricacies and interpretation means that it's much easier for Russia to evade any kind of international attention over the crimes of aggression. So what does that mean? Does that mean that neutrality should be the way forward? The non-aligned movement should have something that it can contribute to? I will certainly argue that this is not the case. The first thing I think we need to realize is that we cannot demand or claim or suggest that neutrality is an option anywhere in the world when we are confronting such huge wanton destruction and mass killings and catastrophic consequences for the people of Ukraine. So I was in Bucha and Borodianka, and I was able to see firsthand the impact of disproportionate attacks and targeted killings of unlawful killings of civilians. So there cannot be a neutrality, in my view, for that. And we also know that the crimes that Amnesty International has been investigating in specific places since the beginning of the world are part of a pattern. In other words, they are not just accident. There is a real pattern emerging, large in scale and devastating in impact. And none of that is understandable, none of it has its logic worthy of the name. All of it is a choice that did not have to be made, whose consequences we have yet to fully appreciate, and from which most of us cannot hide. So, neutrality is not an option for that reason. It is not correct, not possible to remain neutral in the face of such suffering and devastation. It is also not appropriate, in my view, to remain neutral when others develop the new rules of the game. So by failing to provide global leadership at critical moments because of strong outrage over the West's double standard, those countries which are increasingly inclined to abstain on Russia's related resolution are missing an opportunity to shape global events. I don't think most of them will go, or the majority will go as far as to support Russia, although the public opinion in Africa is, the majority of the people in Africa, according to polls, are supporting Russia's aggression, a reflection of disinformation and lack of leadership on the part of the global government, of the governments in Africa. But even if we look at the the neutral position, that is missing an opportunity to shape. I don't think you shape through not playing a more active part. It is also, of course, not appropriate to remain neutral in the face of an act against territorial sovereignty. And any countries and people that have fought hard and long against colonialism, that are fighting against neo-colonialism or any form of imperialism, should fully stand against Russia's aggression of Ukraine for what it means for the future. You know, if Russia could do it, why stop there? You know, what stopped China from looking at Taiwan or other places? And any kind of regional would-be power could could certainly consider that as a precedent setting. So Russia's aggression against Ukraine matters to us all. It has unleashed an international crisis that deserves a global response, global solidarity, and demands solution that requires global thinking and universal commitment. Neutrality is not an option. Acknowledging the West double standard is central, though, moving forward. We can't just ignore that little problem. We can't ignore that the precedent setting have been very diverse, not just driven by Russia, but by many Western countries and non-Western countries, with Saudi Arabia as an example. And we cannot ignore the fact that international justice has been very undermined by our Western bloc on action. So what does that mean for an organization like Amnesty International? It means, first and foremost, that we call on the international community as a whole to urgently consider all crimes of aggressions, maybe not retroactively, although we can consider that, but certainly moving forward. In other words, that any kind of tribunal that will be set up specifically for dealing with aggression should have a broader shape and mandate than just Ukraine. It can begin with Ukraine, but it cannot be stated to be only about Ukraine. So that's the first thing. We certainly believe that this should be driven by a General Assembly resolution. Cannot just be the only mechanism, but it's certainly one that is important. So that's the first point. Second, we urge meaningful and effective adherence to the principle that all those who commit war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the rest should be held criminally responsible for them. What it means is that the temptation to only try Russians will be a problem moving forward. So even though the scale of the violations committed by Ukraine is not comparable to what Russia is doing at the moment, based at least on what we know, it does not mean that Ukraine should evade its responsibilities for any war crimes that it may have committed or will commit. And I think that needs to be clearly stated and be part of the way the International Criminal Court is going to look at that. Unfortunately, right now, while I was in Ukraine, they've adopted a new law, the law of collaboration with the ICC, and that law stipulates that the ICC will have only jurisdictions over crimes committed by Russia. So the ICC is being prevented, if that law is to be fully implemented, from looking at crimes committed by Ukraine on its Ukrainian territory. The third issue is that there are a range of international principles that must be rejuvenated. I mean, clearly the Kampala Agreement is a problem. The fact that the crime of aggression is not squarely within the jurisdiction of the ICC unless countries opt in, that's a problem, and that needs to be confronted, because Russia's aggression is unprecedented for the last 15 years. It is not unprecedented for the last 20 years. And it is all aggressions are a major cause of instability for the world at a time where the world is confronting so many other existentialist threats. So we need to begin by tackling aggression in a much more forceful fashion than had been done so far. And that is why this is, I am so depressed almost by the fact that the Western world is still trying to pretend that this is only a one-off problem that can be tackled through and by the Western Bloc. It is not the right basis from which to build the new world order we need to see happening. One of the key questions I always ask my colleagues at Amnesty International is whether or not we can imagine a new system, a new multilateral system that is workable and working without Holocaust. Can we be imaginative enough as a global community to avoid falling into the abyss in order to rebuild the world on the other side of the abyss? Can we walk around that abyss? I think we have, sadly, an opportunity here with what's happening. We have the opportunity of building a path around the abyss and to imagine a new world and a new world order and a new international system without falling into that abyss. Unfortunately, right now, Russia is certainly not moving in that direction, and neither is the Western Bloc, because walking around the abyss means bringing the international community with you, because we can't walk around or jump above that abyss with only a few of us. We need to be much bigger than that, much larger than that. Otherwise, we'll fall down. We'll fall down. Thank you very much.
Agnes, thank you so very much. I'm now going to open for questions for the next 15 minutes or so. We do have roaming mic. I'm on, right? Oh, I'm good. Okay, yeah. We do have roaming microphones around, so please wait for that to get to you. And please introduce yourself and ask your question directly. Now, while you are all... we have a question already. Look at this, straight away. Wonderful. This is what we like to see. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, I am Nicole, a geologist working with Nordsee. A big part of what it seems like you're talking about is holding Western governments to account in the same way we're asking to hold Russia to account. As academics, as researchers, do we have mechanisms to aid in this effort? Have we built them sufficiently? Have we maintained them sufficiently? Is there some useful way for us to think about our role in this governmental accounting?
Do I answer right away, or yeah? So, if I have understood your question properly, you're asking for the role of the academics in that international system.
In holding our governments to account.
Oh, in holding your government to account. Well, yes, you do have a key role to play. I mean, what I have said is that I've asked the question as to whether, as an international community, we have sufficient imagination to imagine the world on the other side of the abyss? I don't think we do, but you may, because this is what you are here for. You know, this is where you know, you have the education, the skill, the space. Some of you maybe have money to do the necessary research, to engage with people around the world. What should be this world that we need to create out of, you know, this awful experience in Russia? What kind of international system? What kind of national system? How do you work into an environment where indeed, even within our own constituencies, in our own countries, we are confronting racism, nationalism, disinformation, and so on and so forth. So, you know, civil society are engaged in the day-to-day operations of that response. And we, well, I mean, with Caroline and a few others at Amnesty, we try to think and imagine what kind of system need to be put in place above and beyond the abyss. But we really need your imagination, your thinking, your research in order to then build a great campaign around it, build an advocacy around it. So I think there has never been a more important role for academics from around the world, from Africa to here. I'm very perplexed as to why African academics are advocating for the non-aligned movement, which is an old tool. You know, it's something that was set up many decades ago for a different world, and it's, you know, so it's really, I think that's why, you know, we need to have the imagination to think of a different system and a different world. And yes, I think you guys have a role to play on that front. And then, you know, in terms of holding your government to account, of course, you can do that very well. You have the mandate to provide truth, to build good data, to provide fact to the international and the national community, and all of that should be the basis for an accountability demand on your government.
Thank you, Agnes. Yes, Don. Oh, we have a question in the back already. Yes.
Hi, Agnes. Thank you so much for the talk.
I don't think the mic is working.
I'm Maria, and I'm a fellow from Demise in health science, and I happen to be Russian. So I'm born in Russia, and I have a family in Russia.
Could you talk a tiny bit louder?
Yeah, we can't, I can't hear you very well, yeah.
Sorry. Being loud is not my probably biggest skill. What I want, you mentioned having an imagination to look on the other side of the abyss or to see what's happening there. But how are we supposed to do it if we are, for example, as a Western academical community, we are advised not to communicate with the academic community back in Russia? If the whole universities all around Europe or US or Western world said that we stop in collaboration with academics, with people on the other side of the wall or whatever you call it. And I know it's a lot of this comes from the moral or some other things, but how are we gonna learn about the other side if we don't talk to them? And honestly, like a lot of these academics, they signed letters, including me, protesting against this war. A lot of students lost their education, were expelled from the universities. And the only way for them to actually to learn is to communicating with academics abroad, but they don't have this. So how do you see we learn about them if we are not allowed to?
Thank you, Maria. So do we need to make sure we don't cut Russia off too much and to include them to solutions of the future to make sure that we can overcome those problems and have that united vision?
No, absolutely. I guess you're making reference to all the sanctions as well against Russia?
Well, it's it's a bit personal, but I'm against, well, I'm not against sanction, I understand it, and I see that it helps, but it also helps Putin to consolidate. His increase in his support immediately increased after the sanction, and the reason is sanction.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think the sanction regime has gone overboard. It's not very helpful. It's revengeful rather than useful. So yes, just as a mention of, as a point about the sanction, they should really be focused on those that are directly, possibly indirectly responsible for the war, but they should, I think to go after academics, artists, and so on, is isolating Russian at a time when we need them, and we need to engage with them. So I completely agree with you. We need to find ways of reaching out to Russian academics. I know there are a few of them, or a large number of them, getting out of Russia right now. Certainly in my community, civil society, human rights defenders, journalists, I mean, thousands have gotten out and are continuing to go out, and they will form a very important community upon whom we need to rely to imagine the world beyond the abyss, and to work with them. I suspect it may be a bit the same with academics. I'm not familiar enough, but if you are asking a point of principle, I completely agree with you. They must be brought in. We must engage with them, at least those who are prepared to think of a different world and a different system. There are also academics that are part of Russia propaganda and are building all the narrative around history and Nazism in Ukraine and so on. But there are many others who are not, and working with them is key.
Thank you, Agnes. Don, over to you.
Thanks for a really great talk. Well, I guess my question is rather simple. You didn't mention China in your talk.
Yeah.
And where do you see China with respect to establishing this new world order? I guess it's kind of the elephant in the room.
Well, I think China is waiting. I mean, that's always a Chinese game, and they have a long vision and a long-term approach. They are not rushing. They are not impatient. They're just waiting for the right time. And at the moment, I think they're just trying to see, what's going to happen next. Who is gonna emerge as a winning, the victor, not just militarily, but beyond the military victory, further than that. So where do I see China? I see Russia as the one that disrupts. They are playing the role of the disruptor. That's why they invaded Ukraine. They want to disrupt the international system. They may want to rebuild something that is more, Cold War based. I don't know, but they certainly are disrupting. I think China is a much more, has a much better understanding of the kind of world they want to build, including the global system. So they are absolutely at the heart of it, and this is why the failure of the West to build a global coalition around the invasion is so dramatic, because it is an opportunity, again I'm using that in quotation mark, it is an opportunity to rebuild the kind of support we saw after World War II, driven by some common understanding of basic rules that should govern the world and basic understanding of humanity. That's what this invasion is giving us. And that's what the US and other countries are failing to grasp. They are so intent on a military victory, on crushing Russia, that they are missing the big picture, which is this is a war on values. This is a war on the world we want to build. And the world they want to build is one where Russia is crushed and where they get access to oil. And that's not my world. That's not my world. So I'm pretty pissed off. I mean, I'm absolutely, you know, I just find what Russia is doing, and having seen it firsthand, extremely personal, as most Europeans do, because when you go to Ukraine, you realize you're only, you know, 2 steps away from them. You know, it's exactly your reality, your environment, your home that are being destroyed like that, lives being turned around in, you know, in the space of a few days, people's life completely wiped out, you know, future being disappearing, and so on and so forth. So it feels very personal what Russia is doing, and it feels extremely destructive for the world. And it is very destructive. But when I see the behavior of our government, of the European Union, of the United States, I despair. I despair that they are not trying to do the better things. It's not just about winning a military victory, or it's not just about taking a Russian to court. It's got to be further than that, bigger than that. It's got to be building a vision for the world we want to live in. And the fact that they are not doing it is very scary to me, because these are smart people. You know, our government, we may disagree with them, but you know, they have smart people around them. The fact that they are not saying that as an opportunity to rethink the world the day after, or to rethink it the way I think they should rethink it, indicate to me that the world they have in mind is one driven by a single superpower, predicated on access to certain resources, and the rest will follow. I think that's what they have in mind. And that is not what I have in mind, and that is scary. Not as scary as Russian invasion, but quasi.
Agnes, thank you so much. I think that feelings of being pissed off are appropriate feelings to finish on, as we most certainly share those feelings, and hopefully they'll galvanise all of us to help approach and solve these problems. I think it is telling that so many of you from so many different faculties have asked questions about this topic today and have attended this lecture. War is one of those topics which spreads across all of our subject areas and affects negatively every layer of society. And so I encourage you all to come and work with us here in Demise and within the Interdisciplinary Centre for War Studies here at SDU. Finally, I'd just like to thank Agnes, of course, our director, Mariana Holmer, and the excellent DS administrative team, who without them, we just wouldn't be able to put this on at all today. So if you can join me in a final thanks.